Hey. Monkey want a nana. A very tall and buff gray-skinned humanoid creature said mockingly while imitating a monkey. It was Lobo, one of the most infamous bounty hunters in the galaxy. When I get out, I'm shoving that arrogant smirk right down your throat. A human man said angrily from behind a glass wall. He was imprisoned in a room with glass for walls. It was none other than Superman. However, unlike his name suggested, currently, he was severely weakened due to the radiation of an artificial red sun shining in his cell. Oh yeah. You know, I believe that Lois gal might be getting a tad lonely now that you're doing time in a cosmic petting zoo. Maybe I'll go back and cheer her up. Lobo said and rubbed his chin while laughing. But of course, I do have to collect the bounty on this geek first, he said as he pointed at the rat-like creature he had on a leash. Emperor Spooge got a bad temper on him. Then, turning towards the levitating yellow creature behind him, he made a salute with his hand at his forehead and said, "Adios, Wrinkles. You want any more dork snag, you got my number." The one in question, the preserver, replied, "Actually, there is one other being I need for my collection. The last Charnian." Lobo laughed out loud. "Haha. That's rich. I'm the last Charnian." Then, as if it was a big secret, he told Superman. "I fragged the rest of the planet for my high school science project. I gave myself an A." The preserver said no more. With a wave of his hand, a glass cage fell from the ceiling on top of Lobo. Before he had the time to react, extremely potent sleeping gas poured from the floor. Lobo tried to resist and punch the glass walls, but it was futile. He fell unconscious in a matter of seconds. "Thanks for returning my uniform. Now how about my ship?" Superman said after he finished changing from Kryptonian's traditional attire into his Superman costume. "Impossible." The preserver said. "For ages, I've preserved many rare creatures, even some from your adopted planet, Earth. I'm not an animal to keep me stuck in a cage." Superman said revolted. "Normally, I don't take sentient beings. But you and Lobo are all that survived from your respective homeworlds. Same for this nine-tailed fox over here, named QB," the preserver said and pointed towards the glass cage next to that of Superman. In it, a small crimson-red fox cub was chewing on a chunk of meat several times larger than it, while its 9 fluffy tails wagged lazily at its back. These two have adjusted well to their new surroundings. I suggest you do the same. After the preserver floated away, Superman furrowed his brows as he witnessed Lobo getting gassed by the two robot girls attending to his needs when he tried to escape. The chuckle came from the cage where the small fox cub was imprisoned. First time getting locked up. Unexpectedly, it was the very deep voice of a male. Even more unexpected it was that it was speaking in English. Superman looked at the talking fox dumbly, surprised not only at it speaking in English, but also marveling at how the huge chunk of raw meat was disappearing at a mind-boggling speed into the tiny being's jaws. After he was done eating, QB arched its back and stretched its small limbs. A cute yip escaped from his mouth as he yawned. Then, he jumped on the comfortable-looking circular bed and started to push against the mattress with his tiny paws not unlike a cat before he finally found the perfect place. After eating a chunk of meat 10 times larger than his entire body weight, nothing was better than a sweet afternoon nap. "Are you seriously content with staying locked up like this?" Superman asked when he looked at the fox cub, who seemed like he could not care less about their predicament. QB opened his eyes lazily and said, "And what would you have me do? The meat he brings is always laced with tranquilizing drugs. It saps all my strength." Superman had an incredulous look on his face. "Why would you keep on eating it if you knew it was drugged?" The fox cub let out another cute yawn before he said, "How can I turn down free food? Relax. Everything is going according to the plan." "What do?" Superman did not finish his question because, at that moment, a powerful tremor shook the entire spaceship. The preserver's ship was gigantic, one had to measure its size using miles. For such an enormous ship to shake that badly, it spoke volumes about how powerful the attack that it impacted it must have been. Deafening alarms started to blare, and numerous robots swarmed the corridors of the ship. QB's large ears flicked as they captured a particular sound. Fueton. Vacuum wave. Not only that the giant metal doors of the room were cut in half, but the whip-like wind technique continued to fly and sliced all the robots on the corridor clean, from the middle. HMPF. Show off. QB said snarkily. "Why do you even keep on saying the names of your jutsu? It's not like you need to anymore. And what took you so long? I've been locked up for 2 days already." The newcomer's face was hidden behind an Anbu-style white fox mask with red lines drawn on it, but QB did not need to see his face to know that he was grinning widely from one ear to another. "They see me rollin' they hatin'." Hearing QB starting to growl at him, the newcomer added, "Come on. What's cooler than bursting in to save the day, saying the baddest name of a cool technique and kicking everyone's ass? Hahaha, you're just jealous." Superman looked at the man and the fox arguing with each other in an alien language. He did not understand a word from what they were saying, but apparently, the man was very talented in pissing off the little fox. However, as amusing as it was to watch the nine-tailed fox cub kicking up a fuss, there were other pressing matters at hand. He decided to interrupt them. "Hey, friend. Would you mind helping me get out of this cage?" Naruto fiddled with the translating device installed at his belt for a moment before replying to Superman in a perfect English. "Oh wow. What is a human doing all the way here? Lobo attacked me and lured me in the range of this ship and the preserver captured us both. But I'm not a human, I'm a Kryptonian." Though Superman could not see his expression due to the mask he was wearing, he got the feeling that he was very surprised. "But that's not important right now." Superman said quickly, "Please help me get out before the preserver comes with reinforcements." Naruto nodded and clenched his fist, about to punch the glass, when QB's annoyed voice came from behind. "Hey, you asshole, free me up first." Naruto snorted. "Come out yourself, you lazy pig." The TSK came from the fox cub, who then proceeded to increase in size until he was no smaller than a horse. His previously fluffy and cute nine tails were now much larger and apparently incredibly powerful, given that the reinforced glass that had been caging him until then was smashed effortlessly with a mere swipe of one of his tails. But QB did not linger in that large size for a second longer than necessary and immediately turned back to his original appearance, that of a tiny fox cub. A moment later, the glass imprisoning Superman was shattered with a punch from Naruto and Superman stepped out quickly, letting out a sigh of relief. "Thank you." "It was nothing," Naruto said dismissively before turning his back at Superman and going back to QB. He scooped the small fox in his arms and then put him on his shoulder. The fox then curled up into a ball of fluff and closed his eyes. It fell asleep. Strangely enough, no matter what kind of movements Naruto made, the little fox seemed like it was glued to his shoulder, not budging one bit even if Naruto were to bend down completely. Naruto smiled under his mask and gently patted the small fox on his shoulder. "Sleep tight, Kurama. I'll take care of these annoyances," he said, and his hands began to form a series of hand seals when another group of robots appeared at the end of the corridor. This time around, a vortex of razor-sharp wind shot from his mouth and shredded to bits everything in its way. "Don't forget your promise, Lobo. You said that you'll leave me and everyone else on Earth alone. The main man's word is his bond, man," Lobo said. Unlike his normally flippant and goofy attitude, the Charnian appeared to be very serious. It seemed as though he truly lived by what he said, that he never went back on his words. Naruto whistled, impressed. "He's a psychopath that murdered his entire race, but he does have his good points too, eh?" he muttered to himself. Not going back on one's word was something that Naruto could respect since he was exactly the same. Lobo came to him and extended his hand for a handshake. "I owe you one. I'll pay back this favor anytime you will need it." And with that, he jumped on his space bike and left the dry dock of the spaceship. "See you around, big guy," Naruto said and waved towards Superman as he turned around. "You better not stick around. This ship will self-destruct any moment now." Speaking of the devil, just as he finished his words, a loud but clear robotic voice was heard through the entire ship of the preserver, initializing self-destructing sequence. Remaining time until the explosion of the ion engines and reactor. 5 minutes. As he was leaving, Naruto felt a heavy hand pat him on the shoulder. Superman's angry voice came from behind. "Why did you do that?" Naruto tilted his head in confusion. "The what?" Superman was even more irritated at his reaction. "All these creatures are now going to die. I could have saved them. I could have taken them to Earth." Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I didn't know you were such a bleeding heart. They're just beasts, animals. Though it's unfortunate that they will die, it can't be helped. Would it have been better to leave this ship as it was and let it end in the wrong hands? Imagine if some space pirates took control over this ship after we left. They'd have enough firepower to even raid an entire planet." Superman became silent. When he thought about things from that perspective, he understood Naruto's point. It was much better for some animals to die than for such a large and technologically advanced ship to end up in the hands of a villain. "You should get going. There are only 3 minutes left," Naruto said when he heard the robotic voice's countdown. Then, turning around, he sprinted towards his own spaceship. His shadow clones had already started the engines of the ship and opened the blast doors of the dry dock, so all he had to do was to just jump in and close the ship's door behind him. While he was pulling the door of his spaceship after him, Superman flew in with an urgent look on his face. "My ship was destroyed in the fight against the preserver. I need your help to get out of here." Naruto did not waste any time and let him in. A moment later, the ion thrusters propelled the spaceship to several miles away. Even then, it was still too close to the preserver's ship. "Is that a boom tube?" Superman said in surprise. Something similar to a very small wormhole was opened in the space, and Naruto's shadow clones drove the ship right into it. "Not exactly. It's nowhere near as precise as a boom tube, but I don't have a mother box. That stuff is very rare and hard to come by. This is more like a wormhole. But it's the latest warp technology from Almerac, so it's pretty good. It gets the job done." Naruto was lying in his chair bonelessly, with an expression of defeat on his face. There's nothing about our home here either. QBE, who was awake now, headbutted Naruto gently with his snout and wrapped his 9 tails around his neck as to comfort him. The shadow of a smile appeared on his face, but it was not visible due to the fox mask covering it. Still, he brought his hand up to pet QB as a show of gratitude. They may love to argue with each other, but for the past plus 90 years, they've always been together, protecting each other's back. They were inseparable, best friends for life. A long sigh came out of his chest. "What are you looking for?" Superman asked curiously when he came into the control room of the ship and saw the somber mood. It was QB that replied to him, "Our homeworld. That's why I even let myself get captured by that creep for us to have a legitimate reason to raid his ship and access his database." It was not the first time the Preserver had tried to capture QB over the past 90 years, he had tried to do that several times, but to no success. However, this time around, Naruto and QB made a plan for QB to let himself get captured, so Naruto would raid his ship for information. The Preserver is rather infamous in the galaxy for his hobby, collecting all kinds of rare and endangered species to preserve, even going as far as to kill for it. So it makes sense that he has a great deal of information about the universe's geography as a whole. There was a chance that maybe he knew something about our homeworld since he was so adamant about capturing me all these years. Naruto scratched at his spiky blonde hair. "This is hopeless," he said with a defeated voice. "I've traveled through all the 3,600 sectors of the known universe in search for my homeworld. I've visited all the stellar and planetary systems with humanoid creatures in them and all the planets inhabited by human-like beings. I've even gone to the Green Lantern Corps' headquarters, OA, to ask for information. But nobody has ever heard anything about the elemental nations. This guy, the Preserver, was my last hope." Even with his legendary stubbornness, after almost 100 years of fruitlessly scouring the universe for a way back home, Naruto was at the end of his wits. Finally, he realized the futility of it all. He did not even have the energy to get angry anymore. "I'm just tired." A poignant silence followed. "I'm sorry to hear that. I know how it feels to be the last of your kind," Superman said quietly. "But you can't give up on living. Though some things were lost, you can gain others in the future. My parents and my homeworld perished, but I found a new family and new friends on Earth. Now, I have one purpose. To protect my adopted home. To protect it so the Earth won't die like Krypton." Naruto's appreciation for Superman went up a notch when he heard his words. He became silent in contemplation. "You are more than welcome to join us. You wouldn't be the first nor the last alien to have found a home on Earth," Superman offered. The blonde couldn't suppress a snort. "Your purpose and feelings are admirable, but of all the places in this galaxy, why would I choose Earth?" "Haha. Hey, what do you mean, what's so bad about my planet?" Naruto's fingers danced on the keyboard of the supercomputer of the control room and, after a few moments, a datasheet appeared on the large screen. "As I said, during the plus 90 years that I've traveled the universe, I've visited all the planets with human-like beings. I've visited the Earth too, about 60 years ago. What's wrong with your planet? I don't know about the current situation, but when I went there was a freaking world war. Your technology was one of the most backwater I've ever seen at a sentient species in the entire universe, and it went the same for the general population's mentality too. Dictatorships focused on suppressing the population, genocides, racism, and like half of the population was struggling to find something to eat from one week to another. And that's just data that I collected in a matter of days. Why would anyone willingly come to such a place?" Superman dressed his voice awkwardly. "There were, indeed, many issues in the past. Some of them still exist, I will not lie, but we have come a long way since then. Your information is quite outdated. Our technology exploded over the past few decades to the point where we are able to travel in space. Racism has been abolished in most parts of the world and there are very few dictatorships left. We have a saying on Earth, don't diss it till you try it. Maybe it won't be as bad as you think it is." Naruto shrugged his shoulders, not very interested. "Well, I'll have to take you to Earth anyway, so we'll see then." Naruto started typing again on the keyboard and an extremely large and detailed interstellar map appeared on the large screen. It was a map of the Milky Way galaxy. After typing the Earth in a search bar, the map was zoomed in greatly to the point where the map of the solar system became clear. Then, he took the coordinates of the solar system and proceeded to start activating a new wormhole. Unlike boom tubes that were so precise that they could open anywhere regardless, the warp system of Almerac spaceships could only narrow it down to planetary systems. "Out of curiosity, can you open a wormhole to Rao system? Krypton's homeworld?" Naruto turned his eyes from the control panel and looked at Superman's face searchingly. He made a humming noise as he thought. I do have enough fuel to go to Krypton and then to Earth. But I won't have enough to leave the Earth after that. You can refuel on Earth, on our watchtower," Superman said. "As I told you, we are capable of space travel nowadays. Me flying all the way here from Earth is proof of that. There was no reason for Naruto to actually listen to Superman's wishes after all. He had already helped him more than enough by freeing him from the preserver's cage and also giving him a ride back home, but for some reason, he felt a peculiar feeling of kinship with him. Nagato really knew what he was talking about. The older Naruto got, the more he agreed with Uzumaki Nagato's beliefs. That people truly empathized and understood each other only after they felt the same pain. It was the same in this case. Although he had nothing to gain from it, Naruto decided to do Superman this favor because he felt that they were the same, the last of their kind. Turning his attention back to the control panel of the ship, the interstellar map zoomed out and then he wrote Krypton in the search bar. Then, the map of the Rao system appeared on the screen. After typing in a few more commands, the space started to crack and a wormhole appeared a short distance in front of the ship. Destination: Rao system, Krypton. Through the thick windows of the spaceship's cockpit, an enormous red star could be seen. It was Rao, a red supergiant. Supergiants were the largest type of stars that could be found in the universe. The one saving grace for the planets orbiting it was that red stars were not as hot as yellow stars, let alone blue stars. Nevertheless, the intelligent lifeforms in the Rao system had still perished in the end. As the Almeration spaceship flew towards the area that Krypton used to orbit, they saw a very large number of asteroids glowing with a dark green light littering the space. Chunks of matter starting from sizes of several hundred feet to even tens of miles were all that remained of planet Krypton and its moons. When civilizations as powerful as Krypton are wiped out in a single day, it makes you realize how fragile and insignificant our lives are. That no matter what great accomplishments one has in life, in front of nature, we are nothing but specks of dust. Naruto said. His facial expression could not be seen because of the mask he was wearing, but his voice was subdued, melancholic. Have you been here before? I mean on Krypton. Superman, who had been silent until then, asked. Yes, roughly 4 decades ago, to get my reward for completing a bounty. It wasn't long before it blew up now that I think of it. It came out as a shock for many beings in the entire galaxy when Krypton was destroyed. Hearing him speak about his homeworld, Superman was listening with rapt attention. You may or may not know this, but even today, dozens of years from Krypton's destruction, their technology and their relics still fetch a very high price on the legal and black markets alike. It goes to show how advanced they had been for their tech to have not become outdated even after all these years. Can't stop wondering though. How could a civilization as technologically advanced as them die out in such a dumb way? You'd think they should have easily managed to detect that something was wrong with the planet's core and at least escape if not outright solve it. This whole situation smells fishy to me. And not just me, anyone with a working brain would think something else happened behind the scenes. Superman clenched his fists at his words. You're right. Someone did orchestrate everything. My father was one of the leading scientists on Krypton and he had warned everyone that the planet was going to explode, but nobody in the government wanted to believe him and the results of his research. Instead, they chose to listen to the corrupted AI that they had created, Brainiac. But by the time they finally realized that Brainiac had been lying to them all along, it was too late. As far as I know, besides the criminals trapped in the Phantom Zone, I'm the last Kryptonian. My father sent me on a rocket, as a baby, to Earth minutes before the collapse. A short video is all I have left of my parents' memory. Due to his upbringing, Superman was a very kind and pure-hearted man. One that would not willingly hurt even a fly. However, if there was someone he wanted to destroy with every fiber of his being, that was Brainiac. The god of evil, Darkseid, was a close second too. Nevertheless, that was easier said than done. Naruto, I'm hungry. QP all of a sudden said. And just like that, the solemn mood from before was completely broken. Naruto's voice sounded helpless when he spoke next. Seriously, Kurama, you ate 3 hours ago. Have some patience. You can see that there is nothing edible around. But then his words trailed off and he turned his head towards Superman. Coincidentally, QP also turned his head and licked his whiskers as he looked at Superman with a hungry look in his eyes. A chill traveled down Superman's spine and he unconsciously stepped back, inwardly starting to become alarmed. Only 3 hours had passed since he left the Preserver's ship and he had been nowhere close to a yellow sun to recover his strength. Because of that, he was still severely weakened compared to his usual self. As Superman was bracing himself for what could be a battle for his life, the fox started snickering like a hyena. I'm just kidding. Hahaha. After he stopped laughing, QB asked as though it just came to his mind. By the way, can you Kryptonians regrow your limbs if you were to lose an arm or a leg? The real meaning was not lost to Superman. But, before he could reply, Naruto grabbed QB by the scruff of his neck and brought him down from his right shoulder in his lap. Stop teasing the poor boy. He said with a chuckle and, in the palm of his other hand, a glowing sphere of light blue energy took shape. Come, tell me what flavor do you want this time? At the sight of the Rasengan in Naruto's hand, QB's 9 fluffy tails started wagging excitedly. Make it spicy. The fox said and gulped impatiently. He looked like a glutton. In the next moment, the light blue Rasengan turned red, transforming into a ball of fire. With no further ado, QB started to bite and lick at the sphere of fire chakra with gusto, as though it was a delicious ice cream. Look at him, isn't he adorable? Naruto cooed. The growl came from QB for being called adorable, but his ire did not last long because he quickly lost himself in the sauce. He does look endearing when he's not threatening to eat my limbs whole. Superman said, and the two men chuckled together. While they were laughing, an alarm rang and a notification appeared on the large screen of the computer in the control room of the ship. Below a red SOS signal, a small map of the RAW system appeared with a pulsating red dot at the very edge of it. Is there anyone alive? Superman asked, his voice betraying his hopes and expectation. Naruto extinguished the orb of chakra in his hand, but QB growled in unhappiness and bit on his fingers. Ow, you little shit, biting the hand that feeds you. Still, it was not the time to start a fight with the fox and instead turned his attention towards the screen. He changed the destination of the ship to the coordinates shown on the map. Don't get your hopes too high. For all we know, there is no landmass at the edge of the system, so far away from the star. Most likely it's a stranded ship requesting assistance. Naruto said. But, to Superman's delight, the blonde's words were proven to be wrong a few minutes later when a rather small planet appeared in their view. It was gray, seemingly devoid of life, and enormous cracks littered the surface, cracks in the crust that were so large that they could be seen all the way from space. It was a dead planet. Could anyone still be alive on a planet like this? After such a disaster? Naruto wondered. We have to try. Even if the chance is minuscule, there's still a chance that there are survivors. There's no way I'm leaving without saving them. Superman insisted vehemently. He had always wanted to one day come to the RAW system and look for survivors. He had always hoped that maybe just maybe one of the colonies of Kryptonians located outside of Krypton had managed to survive somehow. But whereas at first he had not had the technology to do that, after he got the means to travel in space, he no longer had the leisure to do so. For example, less than 3 months ago, Imperium and his race had also tried to conquer the Earth and kill every living being on it, just like they had done to Mars 1,000 Earth years ago. He was afraid of leaving the Earth unprotected for too long. However, whether it was luck or fate, he was now in the RAW system. He would not miss the chance to save any survivors for anything in the world. When he heard his words, Naruto looked at him amused. What can you do about it if I decided to leave though? You may have special powers on Earth but in this system, you're just an ordinary man. You don't even have a suit to survive the temperature on that frozen planet or the lack of oxygen. Superman became silent. He realized his mistake. The masked person in front of him was not his subordinate to listen to his orders. Please, I need your help. He said and lowered his head. To his surprise, the blonde quickly agreed. Sure. I will help you. For 40 mass units of gold. Superman's head shot up, his eyes wide. What? Naruto chuckled at his reaction and the fox curled up in his lap chortled too. There is no free meal in this world, kid. Do you think people are going to work for you just because you said please? The man of steel looked as though he could still not fully grasp the current situation. Do you want me to pay you in gold to save innocent people's lives? Naruto nodded. Naturally. And you also better not forget that I freed you from the preserver's cage and gave you a ride on my ship too, because that'll cost you another 30 mass units of gold. Normally, I should charge you for this detour trip to the RAW system as well, but I decided to do this one thing out of the kindness of my heart. Take it as a bonus on the house. Superman made an incredulous face and Naruto almost started laughing out loud when he saw the small bulges in his cheeks, a sign of how hard he was clenching his teeth. Oi. You're acting as if I'm robbing you now or something. I don't know what kind of environment you've grown up in, but normal people in this universe expect to be paid for their work. Of course, you can choose not to pay and I'll drop your sorry butt in space right now. Superman could no longer hold back his anger. I thought you were different. I was even feeling sorry for you, I thought that you were like me. But you're just a money grubber, not that different from a highway robber. Naruto stood up from the pilot's seat and the easygoing mood around him suddenly disappeared. I could have ignored and left you to rot in that glass cage and be on my way. I had no reason to take you on my ship and give you a ride to Earth because I have no business there. But I do try to help people in need if it's not too bothersome. Still, this is this and that is that. I'm a mercenary, not a priest. I don't do charity. You think your words of gratitude will fill my stomach or buy new parts and cover the maintenance costs for my ship? Or maybe your gratitude will compensate me for potentially risking my life in an unknown place. Wake up to reality, boy. An uncomfortable silence for Superman was instilled after Naruto said those words. Now let's cut the crap. Are you going to pay or not? Superman sighed in defeat. He understood that he could not force his lofty ideals on other living beings that were not even from Earth, much less on a mercenary. Furthermore, the man in front of him held all the cards at that moment. He and his beast were stronger than his current self, and it was their ship too. Not to mention that, as Naruto said, in his current condition, Superman had no way of surviving on the surface of that dead planet alone. He did not have a suit to protect himself from Rao's red radiation, or from the extremely cold temperature or from the lack of oxygen. If he wanted to save whoever had sent that distress signal, he depended on Naruto. Lastly, he also owed Naruto a debt of gratitude. I don't recall you asking Lobo for anything. The Kryptonian still grumbled unhappily. That's because Lobo had a modicum of common sense to acknowledge by himself the debt he owed me. And yes, just one promise of his is more than enough guarantee. He's been a bounty hunter for decades and never once went back on his word or broke a contract. He may be a piece of shit, but he does have his own standards too. Fine, you win. The Kryptonian said in exasperation and then muttered to himself. What do you even need gold for is beyond me. Naruto sat back on the pilot's seat and steered the ship to enter the cracked planet's atmosphere. For transactions at an intergalactic level, what currency do you think that people use? With millions of planets and even more currencies, do you think money is of any use? Say you give me money from Earth, where am I going to use them? At his words, Superman momentarily forgot how annoyed he was and became genuinely curious. He had never really asked himself that question before because he had never left the Earth until then for other reasons besides fighting against his enemies. Payments are made mostly with goods. Usually, it's stuff like advanced weaponry, spaceships, reactors or magical artifacts. But, depending on the planetary system and the position in the galaxy, gold, precious minerals, and other rare materials can be used as currency too. Hell, you can even pay with rare or powerful creatures or even slaves. Anything that the other party is interested in. Of course, money is used for transactions as well, but only between planets belonging to the same intergalactic empire. Outside of those, money is worthless. Naruto explained all that patiently, with a very light voice. It was as if their small argument from a few moments ago had never happened in the first place. He did not seem affected by it. Apparently, it had not been the first time, by far, that someone had tried to slither their way out of paying him what they owed. So I'm asking you for gold in consideration of your origins. I can't expect someone from a backwater planet like the Earth to pay me with a planet destroyer cannon or a mother box now, can I? He said with a chuckle. Naruto landed the ship on an open space. It looked like a large plaza of a city. A ruined city covered in ice. The entire planet was covered in snow and ice. A somber expression appeared on Superman's face when he looked at the scenery outside. Vaguely, he could recognize the architectural style of the buildings buried below the ice. Alright, I'm heading out. Naruto said with an energetic voice, not exactly fitting with the desolate scene in front of them. After all, they were basically in the middle of a giant graveyard. The burial ground of an entire civilization. Before he opened the outside trapdoor of the spaceship he said, don't think about doing anything funny while I'm away. The moment anyone besides me tries to start the engines of the ship, this bracelet over here and he pointed at the white band around his wrist, will teleport me back to the ship. It's an anti-theft system implemented on all the military ships of Almerac. Not gonna lie, it caught me off guard too when I stole this ship and. Ahem. Anyway, I'm going. Be a good boy and stay put until I come back. Superman was between laughing and crying, not really knowing how was he supposed to react. Indignant for being suspected of being a thief. Annoyed or amused at being treated like a naughty little kid. Or maybe worried that this guy stole a military ship from Almerac. He still remembered his encounter with the violent queen of Almerac. I've met many weirdos in my life but this guy. I think he takes the cake. Phew, what a character. Superman muttered. The masked blonde man may not be weird on the same level of weirdness as someone like Lobo, but he gave off a feeling of instability, making one feel on edge the whole time while interacting with him. Through the entire ride, Superman had been secretly anxious due to how whimsical Naruto seemed to be. Was he a bad guy? Well, not really, because he saved Superman's and Lobo's lives. Was he a good guy? Well, he had just admitted that he robbed Almerac of one of their military ships, and he also demanded a crazy expensive fee for his services. That was not the behavior of a morally upstanding guy, but the behavior of a thief and an unscrupulous businessman. Superman couldn't get a proper read on his character. 70 mass units of gold. Where the hell am I gonna get so much gold from? I'll have to ask Batman for help once again. He could already imagine Batman's patented glare boring a hole in his head or Flash making lame jokes and poking fun at him. He palmed his forehead when he felt the beginning of a headache. But then, another thing came to his mind. Wait, how much is a mass unit? That was not how they calculated the weight on Earth. Clearly, it was an alien measuring unit. Was one mass unit equal to a pound? If that was the case then it was still okay. Somewhat. But what if one mass unit was equal to say God forbid 1 ton? At that thought, Superman's face became ugly to look at. Arg, what a scumbag. It did not take long for Naruto to find out where the distress signal had been sent from. With a sweep of his Sage Mode senses, all life signatures in a radius of 50 miles were revealed. All of them. Better said would be that the only one. There was only one person still alive. As he walked through the ruins of the previously prosperous city, he let out a long sigh. Men, women, children, animals, vehicles, buildings, everything was buried into the eternal snow and ice. Nevertheless, he did not dally and continued walking towards the location of the life signature. Soon, he reached the ruins of what had been a rather impressive building. Upon entering, he noticed that the temperature was a bit higher than outside. He followed the still relatively intact staircase and went down to the underground floors of the building. It made sense that if anyone was living in this building, they would be living underground rather than on the higher floors. A few moments later, he reached a circular room that did not look too different from the control room of a spaceship. The moment he stepped in, a circle of light glowed on the floor and a rather blurry hologram appeared from the device in the middle of the room. It was the image of a tall but very beautiful blonde woman in her late 30s. She looked identical to a female human. Then, a sad but warm voice resounded in the cold room. Naruto quickly fiddled with the translating device at his belt to understand what she was saying. I am Kala NZ. Chief position of Argo City. 5 years ago Argo was a thriving vibrant world. But then, without warning, 5 years ago, our sister planet Krypton was destroyed in a giant chain of explosions. Krypton's destruction tore Argo from its orbit. It looked like the transmission was recorded 5 years after Krypton's and Argo's destruction. As the blonde woman in the hologram spoke, one of the screens in the circular room started showing clips from when the planet was still in a pristine condition and then the following catastrophe. The resulting devastation destroyed most of our world and sent it moving slowly, inexorably away from our sun, leaving a few desperate survivors freezing to death. There was nothing my people could do but pray our distress signals would be answered. But now, I can wait no longer. I have taken a desperate last chance to save my surviving family. To my knowledge, we are all that is left of Argo. Please, help us. She said, tears streaming down her face. With that, the transmission ended and the hologram disappeared. Naruto sighed apathetically. It was not that he was completely stone-hearted to their plight. He was just numb. Krypton and Argo were just two of the dozens of planets that had been destroyed during his lifetime. Probably even at that very moment, another planet exploded somewhere in the vast universe. Going by his homeworld years, Naruto was 113 years old. He had traveled through the universe for 97 years. Even so, he showed no more signs of growing old at all after he reached the age of 25. For all he knew, he was immortal, never to die of old age. Traveling from one corner of the known universe to the other and witnessing all the death and destruction around him made him understand better than most people the frailty of life. And that, coupled with his apparent immortality, made him over the years slowly detach himself emotionally from his surroundings. Why love someone if they could get killed off just like that? Why make friends too just so he could watch them grow old and die? Regardless, Naruto did not dwell on those depressing thoughts for long. His life was not all gloomy and dark. Because he had QB. As though the fox knew his inner feelings, he moved closer on his right shoulder and snuggled into his neck. Naruto smiled behind his mask and brought his left hand to gently pat QB on the head. In this ever-changing world where planets and even entire star systems could unexpectedly perish in less than a day, there was one constant in his life, someone that would forever be at his side. Kurama. Through thick and thin, the two of them would always have each other's back. Walking towards the side of the room, he arrived in front of 4 life capsules. 3 of them had been invaded by ice and the people inside had become frozen corpses. But in the last capsule, a person still lived. A thin girl with shoulder-length blonde hair was sleeping peacefully. She looked no older than 16. She appeared to be the daughter of the woman in the hologram. Looks like our trip here has not been in vain. Naruto said. MHM. And now, that big oaf won't bitch about the money he owes you either. QB grumbled, making Naruto laugh. A yellow-red light appeared around his hand, coating it up to the middle of his forearm. It was Yang chakra, unmatched in vitality. It was a chakra born mainly from his body's physical energy. He ripped the capsule's door open and his chakra-coated hand immediately touched the girl's head. The Yang chakra engulfed her body and an expression of comfort appeared on the unconscious girl's face. Her pale white cheeks quickly became ruddy as her blood circulation increased and she even started to show signs of waking up. He took the young girl in his arms in a princess carry and then the yellow-red chakra covered him and QB too. In the next moment, the 3 of them vanished from the underground room, leaving only a flicker of yellow-red light in their wake. The blonde girl in her mid-teens was lying on her back on a bed with several wires connecting her to various medical machines. A strange assortment of people was gathered around her bed, looking at her curiously. Superman in his red and blue costume, a green-skinned humanoid wearing a blue cape, another man in a bat-themed suit, a scantily clad athletic woman, a masked woman with angel-like wings, a Green Lantern wearing his Corps' traditional uniform, and lastly, a man in a red suit and mask with a lightning motif on his chest. What's with those gaudy costumes? Void, it's so cringe. I'm getting goosebumps. Naruto muttered and raised the sleeve of his right arm to show the fox on his shoulder proof of his words. 1. QB snickered when he saw Naruto's hairs standing on his forearm and his skin looking like that of a chicken. While Naruto and QB were talking among themselves in their native language, the green-skinned man spoke. Their vitals are stable. The condition of her body is remarkably good. She's brimming with vitality. If you did not tell me that she had been in cryo-sleep for nearly 30 years, I would not believe it. Now, we just have to wait for her to wake up naturally. You don't need to thank me, Naruto said complacently. I wouldn't mind a bonus to my paycheck though. The other 7 people in the room all looked at him, their faces displaying various emotions. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with wariness, while others with a helpless look on their faces. When the Almeration ship appeared on the Watchtower's radar and Superman contacted the Martian Manhunter to give them access, upon getting down from the ship, nobody questioned Superman in regards to who were the visitors at his side because they could see the unconscious girl in his arms and the urgent expression on his face. But now that things settled down, they naturally became curious. Anticipating their questions, Superman said, "We should let the girl rest in silence. We'll discuss more in the conference room. Let me get this straight. You took the javelin without telling anyone anything, went off jazzing a crazy alien bounty hunter, got yourself captured, and then ended up destroying the javelin in a brawl, and also with a debt of almost $4 million. Green Lantern," a middle-aged black man shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice betraying his disbelief. Given that Green Lanterns were the protectors of the universe, John Stewart was naturally aware of what a unit mass represented for aliens. 1 mass unit was equal to 1 kilogram, 2 pounds. Converting 70 mass units of gold into US dollars, the final result was that Superman had a debt of over $4 million. Holy moly. Flash gasped. While Wonder Woman seemed not fully aware of just how huge that amount of money was, although she had left Paradise Island a bit more than 2 months ago, she had yet to truly interact with the society of the world of men. Batman was massaging both of his temples with his hands. In contrast, a certain Thanagarian woman could not help herself. Phew. She tried to mask it by coughing in her hand, but when she took a look at the mixture of awkwardness and shame on Superman's face, all her restraint disappeared. Haha. She laughed out loud, beating the conference table with her palm. Girl. This is no laughing matter. Green Lantern barked. But Green Lantern's outrage only made her laugh harder. Dude, over 4 million, this is plain robbery. Flash said while looking at Naruto wide-eyed. Is it now? Is the life of the last Kryptonian and the last Argonian not worth that much? Allow me to expand your horizons. If I captured the 2 of them and sold them to the Sions, I reckon I'd have enough money to even buy a terraformed moon in the Vega system. A whole moon. That's how valuable the last survivors of these 2 races are. I'm actually suffering a huge loss by giving them away to you basically for free. The chill went down everyone's spine at those words. Superman himself appeared to be very perturbed. But even more unsettled by the revelation was Green Lantern. You would sell 2 innocent people to those monsters, John Stewart shouted. Do you know who those guys are? Flash asked. They're a race of maniacs from Vega System, a planetary system outside of the 3600 sectors of the universe, protected by the Green Lantern Corps. They have a hobby of dissecting and experimenting on people, trying to create new races and creatures. One of the worst tumors the world has ever seen. Green Lantern said with a dark expression on his face. Naruto made a pause. Of course that I wouldn't sell people as if they were livestock. Luckily for the big guy and that little girl, I do have some morals too, you know. But if you try to double-cross me. None of the people in the conference room was deaf to the undisguised threat in his words. That's enough. You will have your gold in 24 hours. Batman, who had been silent until then, spoke. What about fuel for my ship? You can refuel here, at the Watchtower. And I thought that Flash was a glutton. Hawkgirl muttered while looking at the 9-tailed fox cub that was sitting on the table in the kitchen of the Watchtower, gorging himself with food. Half of their food supply had already disappeared into the tiny being's seemingly bottomless stomach. My metabolism is too fast compared to normal people, so I need a lot of calories to sustain it. But I'm curious what this little fox special power is. Flash said and raised his hand in an attempt to pet the fox. But Flash cried out startled when one of the 9 tails of QB suddenly enlarged and slapped his hand away. Hey, that's not fair. Why can Wonder Woman touch it and I can't? Flash complained. Wonder Woman was currently playing with one of QB's fluffy tails, showing a gentle expression that made a stark contrast with her normally stoic attitude as a warrior princess. Hawkgirl also tried to touch QB after Flash, but her hand was slapped away too. Now, she was sulking at his side. In fact, Wonder Woman was the only one QB allowed to get close to him. What the others did not think about and what QB did not know either was that, as someone carrying the name of the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and wild animals, Wonder Woman had been blessed with an increased degree of affinity with wild animals and nature in general. The QB, her presence did not feel threatening, and he could also sense her emotions or, better said, the lack of her negative feelings. In addition, having the fur on his tails caressed so gently was a wonderful feeling too, something that Naruto never did. He doesn't like you. Plus, it's common sense you don't normally touch animals when they eat. Naruto said without looking up from the tablet in his hands. Who are you calling an animal, you stupid pig? QB suddenly growled and Flash, Hawkgirl and Wonder Woman backed away from the table startled. It talks. They unknowingly cried out at the same time. However, QB did not seem to care enough to press the issue. He was currently busy chewing on an entire chicken, straight out of the freezer. With food in front of his face, it was like the outside world ceased to exist. Naruto was also busy tinkering with a device in his hand. He was checking on the job offers that his information brokers and business partners had sent him over the past week. He had to go through several dozens of them. The three members of the Justice League looked at each other in dismay. The Martian Manhunter had tasked them with babysitting the mercenary and his pet, while he, Batman, Superman and Green Lantern were going to have a private conversation about how to deal with them until Batman managed to acquire the gold, 155 pounds of it. They're talking about us, Naruto, QB said after he finished the raw chicken and licked his whiskers. No surprise there. The blonde replied. What are they saying? They want to keep us here until we leave. According to that Green Lantern, it would be a disaster if they were to let us loose on Earth. QB said. Wait, how can you hear them? They're on several floors away. Hawkgirl asked. Naruto grinned at QB's words, and although his face could not be seen due to the mask he was wearing, his voice was filled with mirth. I didn't really care about visiting the Earth again, but now that they want me to not go there, I will go. For the hell of it. QB revealed a toothy grin, and he left the rest of the food on the table. With a small bend of his lower limbs, the fox leapt up like a spring from the table back to his favorite place, Naruto's right shoulder. A moment later, without warning, several small marbles fell on the floor and a very intense light flashed, blinding the rest of the people in the room. A startled shout came from them at being temporarily blinded. They did not even know that Naruto and QB had already teleported away, straight back to their ship. The blast doors of the watchtower's dry dock were shut, but Naruto was not worried about how to get out. At his age, after a lifetime of acting as an intergalactic mercenary, cautiousness had become his second nature. He was no longer like his teenager self who used to jump headfirst into situations without thinking. That said, he had made a habit out of leaving markers outside of the planets or spatial stations that he was going to land on to give himself a way out in case things went south. Better safe than sorry. The warship that Naruto had stolen from Almerac was not large. Being designed mostly for scouting purposes, it was only 150 feet long and a bit less than 70 feet wide, having a sharp triangular shape. It had a highly advanced ion reactor, cloaking capabilities such as becoming invisible, and it was focused on speed. While its camouflage, speed and mobility were excellent, the downsides of such a ship were its lack of firepower and the small capacity of its energy shield. But it fit his needs perfectly. His purpose had never been to go at war against fleets of warships, but to travel the universe. Arriving in the control room of his ship, Naruto firmly placed one hand on the board and his other hand made a ram seal. A fantastic scene happened. In the next moment, the entire ship disappeared. A blink of an eye later, the ship appeared several hundred miles away from the watchtower, next to another one of Earth's numerous artificial satellites. An invisible spaceship entered the Earth's atmosphere, heading towards the dark side of the planet where it was night. Generally, the more advanced a civilization was, the more fantastic its night sky was too. It was a rough but not necessarily inaccurate way to gauge the progress of a backwater planet such as the Earth. And, naturally, he went towards the brightest agglomeration of man-made lights. The northeastern coast of the United States since, at that moment, it was night on the American continent. 1 hour later, Naruto and QB were in a late-night restaurant at the outskirts of Boston. They were the sole customers. At first, the clerk tried to stop him from entering with his fox pet, but a low-level illusion technique later he stopped all the ruckus. Now, Naruto was wolfing down one burger after another with an expression of content on his face. He was not as big a glutton as QB, but he did love food too. It was one of the finest pleasures in life. Can't believe how good this is. This also looks like a cheap restaurant. Who would have thought that Earth had such good food? Naruto said. QB made a hum of approval. Then, he lifted a bottle of Coca-Cola even larger than his own body and gulped it all down in one breath. After that, a sonorous burping sound rang from his throat for almost 20 seconds. Man and Fox burst into obnoxious laughter. Fortunately, they were the only customers in the restaurant at that late night hour. Wish they had ramen. Come to think of it, very few planets I've been to had it. On some planets, they don't even eat food. Imagine a life where ramen doesn't exist. Why even live? Even after 97 years of being away from his homeworld, Naruto's obsession with his favorite food had not disappeared. Though he had eaten many other dishes that were admittedly much tastier and richer in flavor than ramen, eating ramen always hit him differently than any other food. It was because ramen also had a sentimental value to him in addition to its good taste. It reminded him of the first two people that had ever shown him kindness, while almost everyone else in his village hated him, Ichiraku and his daughter, Am. It reminded him of home. "Boy, waiter, bring me some more roasted chicken. And do it fast." QB yelled at the clerk, but then yelped when Naruto grabbed one of his large ears. "Don't be an asshole, you could have at least say please." Naruto rebuked. QB tried to bite him, but Naruto let go before he had the chance. "You cocky little shit, one of these days, I'll have to teach you to respect your elders," QB growled. "Pipe down, twerp. Did you forget what happened the last time we brawled?" Naruto said with a smirk, making the fox wince at the memory. Just then, none other than Batman and Wonder Woman appeared next to their table. "Why did you run away from the watchtower?" Batman said. But when they saw the food disappearing into Naruto's mouth despite wearing a mask that covered his entire face, Wonder Woman asked in curiosity, "How are you doing that? Would you believe me if I told you it's magic?" Naruto said jokingly, but Batman did not seem to appreciate his sense of humor, if the narrowing of his eyes was anything to go by. "Anyway, how did you find us so fast? I thought you'd take a bit longer." "I mean, I fried all the tracking devices you've planted on my ship." It was QB that N-word. "That woman planted a tiny tracking device on one of my tails. She thought I wouldn't notice. If you knew what she was doing, why did you let her?" Batman asked suspiciously. "Wait, you knew?" Naruto also asked. "Well, someone had to pay the bill after our late-night dinner," the fox said with a shrewd look in his eyes. It was not only Naruto that burst into laughter, but even Wonder Woman let out a soft giggle too. While no outward sign of anger could be seen at Batman, QB knew how annoyed he was thanks to his negative emotion sensing. But Batman's ire became apparent when he had to pay a bill of several $1,000s. It was not having to pay a few $1,000s that triggered him, but the audacity of Naruto and QB to take advantage of the Justice League like that first, by extorting Superman of a huge sum of money, knowing that he could not refuse his services, and now making him pay for their food after they left the watchtower without their accord. Regardless, he calmed himself down. As irritating as the two of them were, according to Superman, they were not interested in living on Earth. So Batman consoled himself with the thought that this headache-inducing duo of aliens would disappear the next day after they got their gold. "You're not such a bad guy after all, are you?" Naruto said. "What's that supposed to mean?" Batman narrowed his eyes at him. Instead of replying, the blonde man slurped loudly on a large number of noodles at the same time. It was Wonder Woman that answered his question. "Behind that mean glare of yours, there is a nice personality hidden." When Naruto made a thumbs-up gesture at her showing that her words were spot on, Batman's glare intensified. The four of them were currently in the Chinatown district of Boston, in a Chinese restaurant. Batman had been the one to direct Naruto to that place after he asked if Earth had a dish known as ramen. Thus, thanks to Batman, he was now in the middle of inhaling his 12th bowl of ramen. Even Batman's poker face began to falter at the sight of the ever-increasing mountain of empty bowls stacked on the table. In contrast, the ever-gluttonous fox was not eating. QB was lying stretched on his back in Wonder Woman's lap, letting out quiet growls of content from the belly rub she was giving him. Finally, Naruto put down on the table the 12th empty bowl and exhaled loudly in bliss. "Are you finally done eating?" Batman asked. Though his facial expression could not be seen due to his face being covered by his mask, even while he had been eating, everyone could hear the reluctance in his voice when he spoke. "I would like to eat more. But it's enough for now. I can sense there are only 2 employees working in the kitchen at this late hour. I've already troubled them enough by ordering 12 bowls of ramen at once." Batman and Wonder Woman looked at each other strangely. This guy was despicable enough to extort Superman of $4 million, but now he was worried about overworking 2 cooks at a restaurant. They did not know what to think of him. Right at that moment, an alarming news report came up on the TV installed above the counter. A dangerous hostage situation is developing at the federal building in Metropolis. So far, the Ultra-Humanite has refused to speak with negotiators. A freak of science, the Ultra-Humanite is reportedly a genius who is also extremely dangerous. Batman and Wonder Woman jumped up to their feet. But although the situation was urgent, Wonder Woman could not help being amused when she saw that the fox cub in her lap had not fallen off when she sat up. He was still sitting perpendicularly on her lap as if he was glued to her thighs. Still, she could not afford to play around at that moment. She took the fox in her arms and handed him over to Naruto. "Do not fry this tracker too. At least if you want to get your gold tomorrow," Batman said and handed Naruto a bat-shaped tracking device. "By the way, if you need any help, I'm here." We can discuss the price later, based on contribution. Naruto offered while taking back a grumpy and unwilling fox from Wonder Woman's hands. No thank you, Batman said categorically. We can handle this. Then, turning towards the Amazon, he said, Wonder Woman, let's go. We don't need your help, he said. We can handle this, he said. Wahaha. QB laughed evilly from atop Naruto's shoulder. Luckily, he and Naruto were conversing in their native language because otherwise, QB would have gotten into real trouble for making fun of the current situation like that. In front of them, Batman was lying on his back on a bed in the watchtower unconscious, his body a sweaty mess. During the fight against the metahuman criminals hired by Lex Luthor, he had been bitten by Copperhead who injected him with his venom. Batman had almost died. The venom antidote is working. Martian Manhunter said in relief and, not long after that, Batman regained his consciousness. Welcome back, Superman said. We were afraid we lost you. Luthor and the others. What happened? They got away. All but Copperhead. Martian Manhunter answered. I'm heading down to Stryker's to interrogate him, Superman added. Alright, let's go, Batman said and tried to sit up, but Superman stopped him. No, you're staying here. That venom almost killed you. So you're staying here. Batman glared at him but did not continue to argue and sat back on the bed. However, after Superman left, Batman still did as he wanted. Despite the words of consolation from the Martian, he went straight to the computer and tracked down the location of the Injustice Gang through the tracking device that he had secretly planted on Lex Luthor. I know this must be hard for you feeling vulnerable. You're the only one of us without special powers. But you don't need to prove yourself. You're a valued member of this team and we're only trying to. Batman cut off Martian Manhunter's words midway. I'm taking the shuttle. Unless you want to try and stop me. The two looked at each other in the eyes for 2 very long seconds before the Martian Manhunter backed off. On his way back to Earth, Batman also took the alien mercenary and his fox with him to hold his end of the bargain. Now, they were inside a warehouse in Gotham City. Here's your gold. You can check its weight yourself. Batman said and pointed at 2 wooden boxes on the ground. Opening their lids, Naruto saw 35 gold bars in each box, every one of them weighing 1 kilogram. He nodded in acknowledgement and took out a scroll from one of the inner pockets of the fur-collared black cloak covering his body. He spread the scroll open and placed it above the 2 boxes. After putting his hand on top of it, a small plume of smoke burst out and the 2 boxes filled with gold vanished. Nifty trick, Batman said. It was almost a compliment. He naturally understood how many possibilities such a convenient ability could bring. Thank you for the business, Naruto said professionally and then handed Batman a card. A business card? Batman asked, inwardly surprised. I'm an independent mercenary. Since there's no agency or corporation behind me, I have to advertise my services myself. Anyway, you have urgent matters to deal with so I won't keep you. Take care. Naruto said and raised his hand for a handshake. The 2 masked men shook hands and then Naruto and QB disappeared from the warehouse with a body flicker movement. When he could not feel the 2 aliens' presence any longer, Batman looked at the business card the blonde left behind. Looks like he's done other things too besides eating since yesterday until now, he muttered. It was a black-colored card and written on it were a few lines in red and much to his surprise, they were written in English. On the front of the business card, it was written, Intergalactic Mercenary. Uzumaki Naruto. Alias. Caterpillar. Total missions taken. 3381. Missions completed. 3380, 99. 6% completion rate. Method of contact. Lightwave XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX only. Batman involuntarily let out a snort of amusement at the explanation written in the parentheses. Looking on the back of the card, there was a picture of a crimson-red nine-tailed demonic-looking fox. Weird alias. Batman inwardly thought. Naruto was wearing a fox-themed mask, he had a nine-tailed fox cub as a pet, and even his business card had the picture of a nine-tailed fox on it. One would think his alias would be related to foxes. Batman could not see how was a name like Caterpillar related to foxes in any way. Regardless, he did not ponder too much on it. He put the card in one of the many pockets of his utility belt and then headed towards the hideout of Lex Luthor's Injustice Gang. The Amalgamation ship exited Earth's atmosphere and headed towards the edge of the Sol system at a constant speed, in a straight line. There were only two people on board. A blonde-haired man and a red fox. "So, what's the plan now?" QP asked. Naruto was sitting on a chair, browsing through the rather lengthy list of jobs that various information brokers and other organizations that he was in partnership with had sent him. He had been at it for the past 2 hours. It was completely unlike him. Normally, he was a decisive man when it came to job-related things. Naruto made a slow-moving waving motion with his hand in front of his face, and the white Anbu-style fox mask started to disperse in a shower of particles of light. The reason why he could even eat without taking his mask off was that the mask was not an actual physical object, but a jutsu that he had created, one that he could easily control at will. It was a jutsu that he created primarily not to disguise his identity, though it was good at it, since not even Superman could see through it with his X-ray vision, but to solve the problem that poisonous gases and the lack of oxygen, which meant that he could now survive in hostile environments with no issues and even underwater. It was something that he had created out of necessity after going through countless dangerous places during his travels across the universe. When the mask dispersed, the previously blue eyes became red and his sun-kissed blonde hair took on a darker tint too, becoming a strawberry blonde color, almost red. As for his face, it had not changed too much since his teenage years. The more noticeable differences would be that the whisker-like marks on his cheeks had become darker and thicker, and that, between his eyebrows, two rather deep frown wrinkles could be seen. He looked like a man in his mid-20s. When the mask disappeared, Naruto rubbed his face with his palms and sighed. I don't know. I don't even know what job to take or if I should take any job at all. The reason why he had become a mercenary was that he needed a way to finance his expeditions. Intergalactic travel was very expensive. Ships capable of interstellar travel, their maintenance costs, the fuel, the weapons to equip them, information. All those things were not cheap at all, regardless of the galaxy. No, their prices were exorbitant, hence also the reason why his services were rather expensive too. But now that he realized that finding a way back home was impossible, he was at a loss of what to do. You've searched enough, Naruto. Almost a century is more than enough. Even if you went back now, what would you go back to? Everyone in your generation has long since passed away. You know as well as I do that shinobi don't live long lives. Naruto frowned at those words, it had become a habit for him, and that was the reason why the frown lines between his eyebrows were so pronounced. Don't tell me you've forgotten what happened 88 years ago, Kurama. It's the reason why I don't look a day over 25. For me, it was only 1 hour. But when I came out, almost 50 years had passed in the outside world. At those words, the hair all over QB's back and his 9 tails became straight like needles as a series of chills went down his back. At that time, QB had still been sealed inside Naruto, as the two of them had not managed to find a way to let QB out without killing Naruto until he was in his late 40s. However, through Naruto's eyes, he could see and experience the outside world, just like Naruto could. The sight he had seen that day would forever be ingrained in his brain. It was something that neither he nor Naruto would ever be able to forget. Nonetheless, QB did not want to back off. I know what hope you've been clinging on for the past century time dilation. You've been hoping that while a century has passed here, maybe just maybe no more than a day had passed in the elemental nations. But forget about a day, just think about 1 hour. No, even 5 minutes. Who could survive against a rabbit goddess after she kicked us out of the dimension? You think that Uchiha could? Or that useless woman you used to have a crush on? Or maybe your sensei? Hell, at that time, even you wouldn't have been able to last all alone against Kagaya for 5 minutes. Shut up. Naruto shouted incensed. The amount of chakra that his mere shout contained made the entire warship shake terribly. QB scoffed, not in the least intimidated. But he still chose to give up on his tiny fox cub form and his body enlarged until he was several feet tall, making the control room barely accommodate his enormous eyes. His voice became even more powerful and demonic when he spoke next. You don't like to hear the truth, eh? Here. I'll spell it for you. Everyone is dead. You've been living with your mind stuck in the past for almost a century. Fighting for something that probably doesn't even exist anymore. When QB said those words, it was like Naruto had suddenly lost all his energy. He sat down on the pilot's chair and let his head fall against the steering wheel of the ship lifelessly. Inwardly, QB felt his heart crack at that sight. He cared about Naruto like his own brother. They were family. Telling Naruto such harsh words hurt him too. Forgive me, Naruto, but it had to be done. You've spent a human's entire lifetime already on a wild goose chase. It's enough. I can't watch you waste your life like that any longer. It's time to let go. QB thought in his heart. The two of them often argued and sometimes even brawled, but it was play fighting. It was very rare for them to have a serious fight. The number of times they fought ever since Kagaya had thrown them into another dimension could be counted on the fingers of one hand. And Naruto had always avoided speaking about how small were the chances of them ever going back home. He even avoided thinking about it. You're right, Kurama. I'm sorry. Naruto said. In the deafening silence that followed, the sound of his tears falling on the floor could be heard. They were big bitter tears. Tears filled with the frustration and bitterness that he had bottled up inside of him over the past century. All this time, he had pursued his goal with tunnel vision, mindlessly. He had not allowed himself to cry, to doubt himself or to despair. But now, his path had finally reached a dead end. He had traveled to all the known planets inhabited by humanoid creatures, all across the 3600 sectors of the universe. He had met the oldest beings in the universe, the guardians of the universe, to ask for information, and he had even ventured to explore the unknown void of the universe, almost dying several times in the process. But it had all been for naught. He did not have any other leads. He had exhausted all his means. I was selfish. I'm sorry. I've only thought about myself. All these years, you've followed me and helped me without saying anything. And I never thought of what you might want to do. What are you talking about, you bastard? Don't make this about me. QB shouted and grabbed Naruto by the collar of his cloak. This isn't about what I want. It's about. But QB choked on his words when Naruto brought his arms around him and hugged him tightly while crying in his chest. At that moment, Naruto looked nothing like a world-famous intergalactic mercenary. He did not look like someone who had fought on equal grounds against a god and lived to tell the tale. At that moment, he looked no different than a child crying in despair. The now giant fox brought his tails around Naruto and gently laid his chin on top of his head. Apart from the sage of six paths who had died more than 1,000 years before, QB had never cared about any of the humans or beings from the elemental nation. QB had never missed his homeworld. On the contrary, the past century spent traveling the universe, especially the last 60 years, ever since they found a way to unseal him from Naruto, had been the most fun and amazing period of his millennia-long life. Traveling to new worlds, exploring unknown lands, seeing all kinds of creatures, eating so many kinds of good food. It was a life better than he had ever hoped to have even in his wildest dreams. In the elemental nations, he had been nothing but a beast hunted by humans and imprisoned to be used as a weapon of war. He had no sweet memories of it. But he understood Naruto's feelings. He was a man loyal to his loved ones to a fault. And the fourth great ninja war happened only a few weeks after the village that used to hate him had finally acknowledged him. He had become a hero, and it looked like his lifelong dream of becoming a Hokage was within an arm's reach, no longer something deemed as a pipe dream. People had started to respect him and love him. But his friends, his precious people, and everything he had worked so hard for had been taken away from him when he had been thrust into an unknown world. A world that he had roamed like a vagabond for almost a century. QB could understand his despair. So he let him cry. Despite the mucus and tears staining his beautiful fur, QB did not say a word of reproach. It's alright, Naruto. It's alright. Let it go. The long but rather narrow and sinuous lake surrounded by tall and steep mountains on all sides. It was a fjord, a place of rarely seen beauty. A simple wooden boat was floating gently on top of the water, and on the boat there was a red-eyed man with thick and dark whisker-like marks on his cheeks. Despite his rather scary-looking face, there was an aura of peace and calmness around him. With a straw hat on his head and a fishing rod in his hands, the young man looked as though he was one with nature, an integral part of it. It was as though the passage would be incomplete without him. All of a sudden, with a quick jerk of his wrists, he pulled on the fishing rod in his hands. An enormous yellow fish about 25 feet long cast a shadow over the lake when it was yanked out of the water. It was even larger than the man's wooden boat. But there was no panic in the man's red eyes. With practiced movements, he threw 5 shurikens at the large fish still in midair. The 5 shurikens moved almost as though they were remote-controlled drones, not thrown projectiles, and they started flying in circles around the fish. Then, the man clenched his fist, and 5 very thin metallic wires appeared in his hands, seemingly out of nowhere. They had been connected to the thrown shurikens from the beginning. Before the fish even started to fall, arcs of lightning traveled through the wires and zapped the large fish to death. Although the fish was now dead and the lightning had dispersed by the time the fish dropped back into the water, its body was still twitching, disturbing the previously still surface of the lake. But soon, the fish became immobile, its nerves finally ceasing their activity. The fisherman tied the metallic wires connected to the fish on one end of the wooden boat, and then he grabbed the paddles and started to slowly move towards the shore. On the shore, a giant bonfire was burning merrily, and a 9-tailed fox that was as big as a horse was pacing around restlessly. The man and the fox in question were none other than Naruto and QB. They were in the midst of enjoying their holiday alone, on an unknown planet, away from civilization. It was a planet from outside of the 3600 sectors of the known universe, protected by the Green Lantern Corps, in a star system located in the unknown void. Its living conditions were nearly identical to the Earth, but there were no sentient creatures on this planet. There were only animals, and because of that, nature was rich and pristine. It was Naruto and QB's secret refuge, a place where they sometimes went to heal their souls and rest. 1 hour later, more than half of the enormous fish had already been cooked and eaten by the two of them. More exactly, it was QB that had eaten almost everything by himself. Lost in his greed and gluttony, he had even increased his size to that of an elephant so he could take bigger bites out of the fish and eat more at once. In contrast to the voracious fox, Naruto was sitting cross-legged on the grassy ground with his eyes closed. As he drew in the natural energy of the planet, he periodically exhaled a grayish-black cloud through his mouth. Once every few years Naruto came here to expel the impurities that his body accumulated by drawing in the natural energy of the planets that were inhabited by sentient species. Whenever he used his sage mode on such planets, he would draw on the polluted, infected energy of nature. It did not have an immediate effect on him if it was in small doses, but if left it unattended, or if he drew too much of that infected energy at once, he could become like Jugo from the elemental nations and go berserk. Or worse, instead of going berserk, he could turn into a statue if he lost control of the natural energy in his body. He had gone through that in the past once, so he was careful to not repeat his mistakes again. I love this planet. Such pure nature, such calmness, such peace. Naruto opened his eyes and said. I feel like any sage mode user would be able to prolong their lifespan by decades if not even centuries simply by living here. The elephant-sized fox's voice boomed from the bonfire. It's not about the duration of one's life but its quality. Look at me, I've lived for 1,000 years, but the last 60 to 70 years since you unsealed me from your body had been the best of my entire life. If I had to choose between the previous 1,000 years in the elemental nations and 70 years in this dimension, I'd choose this new world in a heartbeat. You're right, Naruto acknowledged. This planet is beautiful, pure and peaceful, but there is nothing to do here. It's nice to come and rest once in a while, but living here alone for years or decades. Most sentient living beings desired the companionship of other people. And Naruto was no different. Although he no longer got emotionally attached to persons and places, he still enjoyed living with people. He liked interacting with others, joking around, visiting restaurants, going to movie theaters, and sometimes he liked even to just go to a bazaar and watch people haggle and argue with each other for prices. Although people had a very dark side to them, they had beautiful parts too. And the more he lived, the more Naruto understood that these two sides of people were like the two sides of a coin. One could not exist without the other. As Naruto was sunken deeply into his philosophical thoughts about people's nature, a very loud beeping sound came from a small distance away. It came from the combat suit that he had left in a hut that he and his shadow clones had built when they arrived on this planet a few weeks before. Now, he was wearing casual clothes, a pair of brown pants and a light blue t-shirt. He had no weapons or any other devices on him, except for the armband that contained the shurikens and ninja wire that he used in fishing. He sighed in annoyance, these guys don't know how to give up. He went to his hut and took out a wristwatch. Then, he covered his face with his hand and made a downward motion with it. A wide Anbu fox mask appeared on his face, and his strawberry blonde hair became bright gold, while his red eyes became baby blue. Then, he tapped the screen of the wristwatch with a finger, and a hologram appeared on top of it. It was a human-sized humanoid rat. A high-pitched voice came out. Seriously, Mr. Uzumaki, where have you been these past 4 months? You didn't give us an update on your location, and most of the time we couldn't even reach you through the lightwave. We've been so worried that the hologram of the talking rat abruptly disappeared when Naruto cut off the transmission. But 2 seconds later, the wristwatch started beeping again. Hey. Why did you hang up on me, huh? Here I am, all concerned about your well-being, and that's how you treat me? You ingrate. If the mask didn't cover his face, one would be able to see that a vein started to pulse on Naruto's forehead. Alright. I'll cut the transmission and switch off the lightwave receptor. No, wait. The rat man yelled frantically. He calmed down when he saw Naruto did not follow up on his threat and said unhappily, sheesh, you're as grumpy as ever. No pleasantries, no joking around, nothing. Get to the point already. Naruto couldn't help shouting. I do joke around with most people, but you're just so irritating. Arg, why do I even put up with you? A smug expression appeared on the rat man's face at the blonde's outburst. It's simple. Because I'm the best at what I do. Naruto let out a snort but did not contradict him. Look, I know you said you need some time on your own, but we've got a huge job on our hands this time. To be more exact, 2 huge jobs. With the payment from these 2 bounties, you'll probably be able to even buy a fleet of ships strong enough to take over a planetary system. Or legally buy a small-sized terraformed moon. When Naruto remained silent, the rat man said in exasperation, I hate it so much when I can't gauge your reaction because of that creepy mask of yours. After a few seconds of silence, Naruto spoke. I told you I'm retired. At least for now. I don't really have a need for money. I have enough money to live in peace for a long time. I don't care about conquering planetary systems in Wetnet either. As for owning a moon. He trailed off and started to chuckle. He already had a planet twice as large as the Earth with perfect living conditions and nobody to mess up its nature and ecosystems. It was like a paradise. What was a mere moon compared to that? Come on, just this once. I really need you to take this job, don't do me like this, man. The rat man almost begged. Naruto covered the forehead of his mask with his right hand and sighed, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. What did you do this time? Did you gamble your wife and your kids and lost again? It was not a joke, nor an exaggeration what Naruto asked. The rat man in the hologram was a degenerate gambler, someone that actually had really gambled his wife and 6 kids and lost them in the game. Granted, it was proven that the other party had been cheating and he didn't truly lose his family in the end, but the fact that he was willing to gamble away his family for money spoke volumes of what type of person he was. The rat man fidgeted as if he did not know how to explain himself. I took the payment in advance for those jobs and I've already spent that money. But don't worry, getting that money back is not an issue. At all. I swear on my honor. The gambler's honor. PFFT. Naruto inwardly said but stayed silent and let him continue. The problem is that 1 month has already passed since I accepted those bounties on your behalf and they told me they don't need their money back. Either we complete the mission or they will send the Gordanians after me. Naruto felt the beginning of a huge headache. Anything involving the Gordanians was going to be nasty, they were infamous for being a warmongering race hell-bent on conquering and enslaving other planets. Explain. That single word made the rat man tremble. He understood that Naruto was slowly getting pissed and he also knew better than most people that as easygoing and amiable Naruto seemed to be, it was a terrible thing when he got truly angry. A few minutes later, when the rat man was done explaining and anxiously waiting for the verdict, Naruto asked, "So, the first job you accepted was from the Sions. They want me to capture someone for them to experiment on him. Tell me, Ruinak, when have I ever accepted any jobs from those bastards? Mr. Uzumaki, please don't get angry." The rat man now named Ruinak said quickly, desperately trying to stop Naruto from getting angrier at him than he already was. "I've checked the past of that bounty target. I spent a lot of resources for that, but I did find out that he's caused several world wars and genocides in his homeworld. Whatever the Sions will do to him, he fully deserves it." Feeling that Naruto was mollified by his explanation, Ruinak continued. "As for the second job, I took it especially because it was connected to the first one. The king of Tamarin sold his youngest daughter to the Gordanians as a slave for the sake of peace. But the queen of Tamarin, his wife, secretly put out a bounty to rescue her daughter. My sources tell me that the Gordanians demanded the princesses of the royal family of Tamarin at the request of the Sions. So you mean to say I'll be hitting 2 birds with 1 stone? Ruinak nodded vigorously. "Exactly. You can capture the target of the bounty offered by Sions, and after you hand him over to them, you can also raid their base and rescue the princess of Tamarin." Naruto hummed in thought. "I'll need you to send me all the data you have on the bounty offered by the Sions. I will be the one to decide if the target really is a scumbag or not." "Absolutely." The rat man said eagerly. A few hours later, Naruto was sitting next to a campfire with his back resting against a tree as he read on a tablet the information that Ruinak had sent him in regards to not only the Sions bounty, but also the current state of affairs in Tamarin, the Gordanians' attack, and the enslaved princess. "This guy really is the best at what he's doing, but sometimes I feel like I want to strangle him to death," Naruto said in annoyance. Ruinak was an information broker, one of the best if not the best in the galaxy. Naruto was not the only bounty hunter in partnership with him. Even Lobo took bounties from him once in a while. Ruinak was not subordinated to anyone. He was a free agent, simply selling information to anyone who paid him. In spite of his despicable morals and degenerated persona, as a businessman, Ruinak was excellent. He was an extremely well-connected person. There was not an inhabited planetary system or prison planet in the 3600 sectors of the known universe where he did not know a guy or two. He made it his job to learn all about the latest bounties posted by the major powers of the galaxy and contact the bounty hunters that might be interested in them. The bounty hunters were happy to get a juicy job, the clients were happy to have their problems solved, and Ruinak himself was happy to get a hefty commission from the bounty hunters and even from the clients themselves if they contacted him directly. The rat man was not the sole information broker operating on an intergalactic level, but he was among the best. "He's definitely not gonna get even 1 coin as commission from my reward after the shit he pulled." QB was curled up very close to the fire in his tiny form as a fox cub and yawned lazily every once in a while. "You could have just ignored him and not taken the job. But you couldn't help playing the hero again, eh?" QB jabbed at him. Naruto glared at the fox and said in retort, "What hero? I'm getting paid for it. Not to mention, we've worked together for so many years. Keep telling yourself that." Seeing Naruto becoming silent at his words, QB asked, "So? Where are we going now?" "To Earth. What would the Sions want from Earth?" QB raised his head from his front paws and asked, appearing as though he was very intrigued. "Apparently, it's someone who has lived for nearly 50,000 years. He's the one who caused the 2 deadliest wars in Earth's history and numerous other atrocities. A human named Vandal Savage. I think the Sions will dissect him to the last atom to see what makes him tick, what gave him immortality when everyone else on Earth lives up to a century at most. Didn't think we'd get back to Earth so soon. Not that I have anything against it, mind you." QB said and the 9 fluffy tails at his back started wagging. Naruto grinned when he looked at the tiny fox's unveiled excitement. Oh ho, you look excited. I wonder why. My bet is that you can't wait for that woman to give you some belly rubs again, he said snidely. Why you? QB sputtered at the unexpected verbal attack. What does that have to do with anything? Oh really now? Then tell me, what's the tail wagging for? QB bit on his own treacherous tails in embarrassment. At the memory of the blissful feeling from the Amazon princess's gentle caresses, his tails had involuntarily started wagging on their own, out of his control. QB did not understand himself why he had liked it that much, he did not know that it was because of the gift that the Olympian goddess of the hunt and wilderness had blessed Wonder Woman with. If only the people from our homeworld could see this. The mighty QB no Kitsune, the strongest Biju in existence, wagging his tails like a dog and purring like a cat from a simple belly rub. You were so cute. So adorable. Wahahaha. But as he laughed out loud, Naruto suddenly jumped up to his feet and, immediately after, he leapt into the tree behind him. From there, he broke into a mad dash, Shinobi jumping from one tree to another as quickly as he could. That's because a gigantic nine-tailed fox, the mighty QB in his original form as a tailed beast, had suddenly smashed the spot he had been sitting on before with his immense claws. Hundreds of feet tall and wide and 9 tails that were just as huge as his main body, even the enormous trees of that virgin planet were dwarfed by his gigantic size. Now, he was a behemoth. Naruto. Don't let me get my hands on you. QB's demonic roar rang, and the shockwaves of his roar flattened to the ground the forest around him for miles. In his original form, the 9-tailed demon fox truly was like a natural disaster, a calamity. But in front of that terrible might, obnoxious laughter could be heard in the distance, just as loud as his roar. Naruto had purposely infused his chakra in his voice to make sure that the fox heard it. That's it for today, thanks for watching.